session with me and Pauline to talk about humanitarian love. And today is the second episode we are proudly presenting. And the topic that we wanted to talk about is all the circumstances that we're living in and what are we making those circumstances mean, what are we thinking about them, and also where to start wherever your love journey is, where you could concentrate on. And also we would love to offer you a challenge to challenge yourself or to come on this journey with us and allow us to accompany you in that journey of going from one step to another and make this progress. So, before I pass the floor to you, Pauline, I just wanted to somehow explain what I mean by circumstances so that you have a bit of a better idea. So, when Pauline and I talk about circumstances, what we really mean is that we humanitarians tend to move a lot to different duty stations. And we believe that because of that move, because of living in different duty stations, like for instance, many of us tend to say if we're in E duty station, we're no non-family duty station, it's impossible to find someone that we want. Or other people might say, well, I'm living in the biggest city in the world, like New York or other places, and no one really notices me, or I can't find the person I want, right? So those are the circumstances that we're living in, whatever we are, and we tend to use that against ourselves often by thinking that those are the reasons why we can't find love, right? So that's why whether you are fresh out of the relationship, whether you are you've never dated anyone, or whether you are now starting to date in a new circumstance, in a new place. So, what are the things you could do and what to focus on? This is what we want to talk about. So, Pauline, let's dive into the topic of how we humanitarians tend to maybe often see these new circumstances, new places as an obstacle as to why we can't find love, right? Rather than maybe look at it differently. So, what would you say?
Yeah, and I love that you already mentioned the example of, New York versus the duty station, because this is one of the most common issue that is brought up as like, why do you think you're still single? Like, what is the main obstacle? And usually it's like, there is not enough like people where I am, whether it's a village, whether it's a city, and whether it's a duty station. So, yeah, I wanted to list a few more specific circumstances that we live in as humanitarian that can be taken as this is one of the reasons, like this explains that I'm still single, and then we can question that and go into a conversation about that. So yeah, Asel, you mentioned duty station, and so the idea of, is there not enough like potential partners? And it's true that if you are in a small field location, it might be a reality, right? So there's the duty station. There is the frequent movement from one duty station to the other that can be challenging for creating bonds, for bonding and for having those long-term relationships. There are the security issues, of course, because when you have a curfew, you cannot go out and have a cocktail and meet somebody, that you met on an app.
Yeah.
You have, yes, when you want to spend an evening or a night with someone, you might have to inform your manager or have share your privacy. This is another situation, is like having privacy and intimacy is complicated, can be complicated. So these are the specific I would say, yes, circumstances that you have as a humanitarian: duty station, frequent movement, security issues, privacy issues when you share a compound or a house with your coworkers. So
Yeah.
yes, here they are. But now, yes, as Asel was starting to say, those are circumstances, and they don't have to be absolutely the obstacle for you to be in a relationship and, yes, make it work.
Yes, exactly. So if you're wondering that, well, Pauline, Estelle, you don't understand my situation and my situation is different, I totally get it because I found my partner in a non-family legislation. I don't know about Pauline, but I think we talked about our experiences as well. But anyway, and also we know many people, I personally know also many people who have done the same in a sense that they found love in the places that they never thought they would, or in big cities that they again never thought they would. So you can see that there are so many possibilities. Now, the key element I think that we want to get your attention and focus on, especially today where we're starting, is I would always have a look at what are you making those circumstances mean in your life, meaning that are you making it mean that I will not be able to find love because of this and this and this that Pauline and I mentioned, right? Or are you looking at it as how can I find love within the circumstances where I am, right? In other words, whatever the situation you are in, how can I get what I want in the way I want to? And if we ask that question, I think it helps us um, look at our brains and our ideas of brainstorming of what are the possibilities available. And we're not saying, of course, that endanger your life by doing it, or getting in trouble with your security officers. We're not saying that, obviously, but within the safe compounds of what's possible for you in where you are, what are the possibilities that you can explore to see what works for you. Now, obviously, for many people, things like app may not work. For other people, apps may work as well, and we're not here to really tell you what to do in terms of the actions because you will know best what to do. What we really want to advocate is have a look at all of your thoughts and beliefs as to what you're believing to be true about your situation, and then how can you look at that from a different perspective of making it possible, right? So this is really the advocacy that we're making. Pauline, what would you say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the idea is to, for me, I'm all about empowerment and the power, the empowerment, you take it with your thoughts. Because if you've chosen this career and if you don't want to change it for now, for the
Yeah,
moment, and if you want to have a relationship, you don't want to have you don't want to believe like so strongly in those obstacles. You want to look your way around those obstacles, and this way around is the way you look at them, the way you choose to see them. And
yeah,
as Asel was just giving her example, my example was the same. Not my current partner, but the first long relationship that I had. That I met him in the field in Darfur, in a non-family duty station, and also it's not just our two examples. If you
yeah,
want to start looking for all the example of the people that you know that have found love regardless of the circumstances,
yeah,
because you can make it work in a non-family duty station. You can find somebody wherever you are moving often from one station to another one. So look for those examples and start challenging your mind if you find that you're caught in those stories. We call them stories.
yes,
It's like creating some distance with your thoughts and say, oh yes, I'm justifying my situation because of this.
yeah,
When you do this, you're giving power to the circumstance and you feel powerless. This is why I
yeah,
mentioned the empowerment. It's like, okay, seeing this as, no, I can have some influence and some margin of power over that. Either you can
yes.
change your circumstance and decide to change career or change the station. This is a possibility. But if it's not possible or if this is not what you want, change your thinking. It's going to be easier.
Yes, and the other thing that is very crucial that I want to mention is we often tend to tell ourselves that what it has never worked before, right? Or I have never been able to be that person who finds love in that environment, or whatever the past reference that we have that we tend to use against ourselves. So please don't do that because you can always give yourself a chance to start from scratch if you wanted to. Or if you really want to reference to the past, you can always learn from it, but don't let your disappointments from the past, carry it with you and then keep influencing your decisions currently. um, because we often, I think, also tend to say like, well, I can of course go on these dates, but then it will never work, right? Or it will never go anywhere because, and then we have lots of stories about that as well. So don't allow your brain to do that, because that will, what will happen eventually is that whatever you believe to be true, you will continue proving to yourself. And that's when things will never work. But if you allow yourself to say, what if the past is an option to consider, right? So it's an option to take it with you, but it's also an option to leave it where it is and then start from the creating new feelings, starting from how can you do this time differently? How can you do this time differently so that you come closer to what you want? And maybe the other piece that I really love from Pauline, what she said about empowerment, is that part of the empowerment, meaning you can always decide to trust yourself that you can make this work. And instead of thinking, oh, this is just how it is, I'm in Darfur or I'm in, I don't know, Erbil or other place, Baghdad, for instance, right? I'm just, of course, just coming out with examples. You can always sit and tell yourself, well, because of this, I will never be able to this and this. If you keep telling yourself or believing, that's obviously what you will continue proving to yourself. So let's not do that, and instead ask yourself, how can you trust yourself that this time you will do differently than before?
Mm.
Pauline, anything on this, or any other things that we can tell people of what to do?
Well, I would not add any other thing, but just to reinforce what you're saying, because I think this is a new information for, I would say, most of us, before we do any
Mm,
coaching. The idea of how the brain works is that once you have a
yeah,
thought and a belief, your brain is like a faithful little dog. It's going to continue to prove to you over and over again that this belief is right, even if it's not
yeah,
serving you. So if I would give you one piece of, one prompt for you to reflect on, is, write about what obstacle do you see for yourself to be in a relationship today. Start with things like why is not possible or why is complicated,
yeah,
and to have clarity about it. So listing, okay, I'm in this duty station, I have never been in this relationship, most people around me are in the same situation. So start labeling them and knowing them, because this is where, yeah, you want to start. And then you can start debunking them, or questioning them, or turning them around. But the first
yeah.
is knowing what's in your mind and what is the story that you're currently believing.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing that I would add to that is that always ask yourself empowering question, right? I think this may sound very cliche to say, but that's so true. Depending on what kind of questions you ask yourself, you will get that type of answer. If you're going to ask yourself the question of, poor me, I can't do this and I can't do that, why this happens to me, we often ask this type of question, right? I've asked this type of question so many times as well, but I've noticed that this just perpetuates and makes things even worse and worse in my own head. So that's why I ask yourself the questions that allows you to come to new ideas, like um, why the past has to make any um, influence on your current decisions, right? Or how are you going to make the decision to do things differently now than you did before? How are you making this goal that you're pursuing? How are you making that work within the confines of what you have now? Or another one is, if you are deciding to commit to this, what are the next steps you're going to take without allowing yourself to be confused or to um, uh, allow fear to take over, or uncertainties to take over, and then just say, oh, I'm confused, I don't know where to start, or I'm afraid to start something, or I don't think it will go any far, or whatever it is that you keep telling yourself, which may not really serve you, right? So that's why ask yourself those questions of how you're going to get to where you want to now. Now, another caveat maybe is important to note here is that we often tell ourselves, like, give deadlines of, I have to have this within, let's say, this year. Whatever it is, the reasoning behind, we often say the reason might be, I don't know, because I want certain results, or I want to create a family, or whatever else we're saying, and that's why I have to have it this year. What will tend to happen oftentimes, unfortunately, is that we will create pressure that's unnecessary in our head, and therefore we tend not to do well under pressure, many of us. I am saying this is a caveat because many of us also tend to do well in pressure. So you need to see for yourself what's your best strategy, right? So I tend not to be good at pressure and working under pressure, but I know some people are. So don't create yourself any unnecessary pressures that you think will not help you create the result. Because if you are under pressure, what that means is that you are allowing the fear take over rather than keeping that trust and trusting yourself that you will find what you're looking for. And therefore, we may not actually get to what we want. So think what works best for you and then act around that. And also, if your brain really wants to create deadlines for you, ask yourself, why are you rushing, right? Or what is the reasoning behind for you putting deadlines, because that can also show some kind of fear behind it. I just wanted to put it out there. Anything else we missed, Pauline, on this topic?
I don't think so, no. So for me, just to maybe to close, I would encourage people, as I said, if you are in this path, to start listing the obstacles
Yeah,
that you see. And I would also encourage you to share it with us, huh? Maybe
yeah,
because it's going to give us, food for thought and for debate and questioning. So if we have missed in the living circumstances, if we have missed one of them, and you're like, oh, I have this circumstance and it seems like a super big obstacle for me, please reach out to Asel or to me and let
mhm.
us know, and just share this with us, and we can discuss it in one of our lives.
Yes, exactly. Amazing. So, uh, the last, uh, I guess, the wrap up of all the things is that we really would love for you to not use the circumstance against yourself, or not use the circumstance as a tactic for prolonging or postponing your life you want to be living, right? But rather, within that circumstances, how can you be in charge of creating what you want, whatever that is? And how can you do that in a way that actually suits your desires rather than you adapting to whatever is available and then let's see just what happens? And then, no, we're not suggesting any of that. We're actually advocating that let's use the circumstances to your advantage, and within that circumstances, create exactly the love you want in the way you want it, so that you don't feel like you have to compromise or you have to just get along with it because of the circumstances dictating you what to do, right? So that's all what we wanted to advocate for. Okay, having said that, thank you so much for listening and tuning in to us. I just wanted to say that today we try to be very succinct because I need to catch my flight to Kyrgyzstan. That's why I'm very sorry that we may not have dived into certain things longer than usual, but promise next time I will settle in a little and then we can make it longer, and maybe we can also talk about um, other questions within that context that we're talking about in more detail, right? So in the meantime, we encourage you to share with us whatever is coming up for you after listening and watching this, and then we're happy to address it here as well, because that could be beneficial for everyone else who is considering, right? But maybe haven't reflected in that way. So you will be helping us and helping the humanitarian community to find love in the way we want to. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Pauline, and see you next Tuesday.